Hello, everybody. It is great to be here today. My name's Gary Fowler. I am the CEO, president, and co founder of GSD Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in Silicon Valley in Santa Clara. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce my friend, entrepreneur, venture partner, startup founder, growth leader. I mean, you name it, from Mumbai, India, Harsh Shethia. Harsh, great to have you here today.
Hey Gary, glad to be here. Glad to be here with you. It's an amazing session.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So tell me a little bit. I just have a question for it. I was going down through, and you have an amazing background. There was one thing I wanted to ask you a question about.
Sure.
What is dial 1298 for ambulance?
So essentially, what it's actually an Indian version of an emergency healthcare system. So just like in US, people call 911, right? In UK, it is 999. So it's like 1298 is like an Indian private ambulance service, where essentially you can call that number and get access to emergency ambulance service as and when you need. It's spread across a couple of Indian cities, so it's a fairly good system.
Oh, that's great. So, I was looking, what's the journey like? So you go from Project 1298, you're working for J&J, and you were working with the cardiac group with J&J.
Yeah.
And and it looks like you blew your numbers away, 100% target and special achievement awards and et cetera.
Yeah.
What made you decide to, so as you're moving on, to Paytm and then, up the food chain till founding your own company? I mean, what's the difference between working for a J&J and founding Paytm?
So actually, I did not find Paytm. Paytm was already a big unicorn by the time I joined. I was just, I was working in a regional sales role. However, the environment is completely different, right? So when I used to work in J&J, the systems were extremely formal, extremely organized. You have standard SOPs which you need to follow. It's pretty much like a routine job. So after spending 2 years over there, and I had a great career over there as well. I learned a lot of things, grew a lot, made a lot of money as well. So during my sales stints over there. So post that, actually, I got this opportunity with Paytm. Paytm is actually the largest fintech unicorn in India right now. And not
Oh, okay, okay. I thought you founded that. Well, then you founded Dial Care.
That's right. That's right. That was my core service, which I was primarily working on.
Okay, so
So
you went over to Paytm. You become a sales manager at Paytm. What was it like going from this large international, global conglomerate to going into a fintech company?
exactly. So J&J, as I mentioned, was extremely structured. Standard SOPs were there. It was extremely, so it was more about just kind of following the protocols and getting things done. As you mentioned, as is your name, get shit done, right? So since then, when I went to Paytm, it was completely, the energy was infectious. It's hard to kind of describe what a startup office is like. Where so I was based out of Mumbai, but I've been to Noida office, which is the head office of the company, and I can find the founder of the company just sitting on with his laptop, which is easily accessible, just with a regular desk, not like a cabin which we used to have in J&J, right? That's the difference in the culture, and it's always high bustling, high noise, people running after one another, trying. So the growth is also ridiculous. In J&J, if I can manage 25%, 30% growth year on year, that's considered an achievement. I over here I'm expected to make that every month. So that's the big difference.
There you go. But you can have a lot of fun, right? Founded a company. So you move on. You do the fellow program, the startup leadership program in Mumbai. You move over to Dial Care, and then what about the Founder Institute? So what's the Founder Institute? I know the Founder Institute, but what did you do in Mumbai for the Founder Institute?
So Founder Institute is essentially a pre-seed accelerator. I'm sure as you must be familiar, right?
Sure.
So essentially it's for individuals who want to kind of initiate in their startup journey. So that's kind of the focus, right? So essentially I kind of helped them, set up their first operations in India. So we were kind of, creating like a team for Founder Institute with local directors. We appoint local directors, and we help set up their own chapter within India, so that we can have an entire incubation cohort for FI in India. Because till date there hadn't been a single FI chapter. So that's what we started for FI as well. Founder Institute. We are planning to set up a chapter. We have four directors, and we had partnered with all the major investors, lawyers, financial, you name it, all the channel partners which were required to run a successful program. And unfortunately, that was the time that COVID hit, and it became a complete mess. And it was quite crazy at that point of time.
Interesting. Sounds like your dog's in the back.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm surprised my dog's not barking. If she would hear it, she's actually her ears are perked up right now. Uh,
Interesting.
so we're talking about developing countries, uh,
Yeah,
companies from developing countries going global. You've seen a
exactly.
lot with the venture from the venture side. You're incredibly active in podcasts and webinars. I see you all over the place. But what kind of special challenges do they have, Harsh?
So the biggest challenge which I find, they just don't. A lot of times they simply don't even have the mindset, right? A lot of the times they think that if they achieve Indian, if they complete India, that's kind of the scale that they are at. Even the current program which we are kind of promoting right now, the two of us together, even at that point of time, I realized they simply a lot of times they simply lack the mindset of truly going global, selling it into US, selling it into Europe or Southeast Asia, etc. A lot of times it's the mindset which is blocking them, because they are unable to think that big. And then they get really surprised when the investors are saying that we are unable to invest in your company. So the first requirement is you need to be able to think big and think of taking your startup global from the time starting out, right? So that's the number one challenge. And the number two challenge which I face, which I observe, is they don't have the right channel partners which are required, because expanding into a different country, a new country, is an extremely challenging it's a challenging situation, right? You need to know the right people. You need to get this legal setup done. You need to find the right investors. Most crucially, you need to find the right employees. That's the most important challenge. And they just can't think through that, because they have that lion's mindset, right? So in the
Mhm.
lion's mindset, the lion tries to do everything by himself. He's unable to delegate the tasks which are required. So that is where they kind of struggle. They think that they have to do it everything by themselves, but all they have to do is ask for the right help, and they can get that thing sorted.
Yeah, no, I hear you 100%. I mean, I see it every day, and I know we're in a lot of events together around the world, and I've seen it through my accelerator too. It was incredible because you get these folks, and the other thing is on one side, they don't understand the global. The other part of it is, or how to go global, or think it's important. The other part of it is they don't know how to do customer development to be able to test their products to see if there is really a market for it, right? They build things in a vacuum. What do you see?
Yeah, so absolutely right. So if you look at it, even if you want to go global, right? We've discussed it several times. When you want to go global, your communication. So I'm a marketer by heart, essentially, right? A sales marketing guy. So the most important thing is to use the right language, the right words for the right customer, right? Most of the times they kind of struggle with that, and the focus is exclusively on the product, without kind of understanding what the people want, what the core pain points are. And the same product can solve different problems in different countries, and sometimes even in different cities. So you need to be able to be flexible and kind of understand that, and incorporate that in the way that you're pitching a product. You can't have a standard copy across the world.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And then, a lot of cultures are a lot different, Harsh. Some of them are very aggressive. Some of them are really, really laid back. It's like siesta time. They have a different mentality about, what life's all about. And, you go down through and try to tell them that it's about getting shit done. People don't want to hear about what you're doing. They want to hear what the results are, right? What you can really do for them. So, we see that a lot. What kind of challenges are happening right now? I know there's a lot of, the health situation with COVID in India. How does that impacting the startups right now?
So it's crazy how tough it has been due to COVID, right? You must have seen the glimpses of it in the news, right? The kind of devastation that's happening on the ground. The situation is actually even tougher. People are struggling to get the right healthcare facilities which are needed, right? So what's happening because of that is I can give you a personal example. I'm raising funds actively for three startups right now. For two of them, the founders or their relatives have fallen prey to COVID. Because of that, we could not attend investor presentations with that. In one case, it was the investor in an investor network. His entire family got COVID. His entire team got COVID. Because of that, they are completely blocking any investor presentations for the next 2 months. So it's been extremely tough, and because of that, the fundraising is being challenged. Secondly, due to lockdowns, people don't have money, right? So if the people don't have money, people are not going to pay for buying stuff, right? Because of that, startups are getting cash strapped, and all the financial projections which were made are completely going for a toss. And because of that, the investors are then asking questions, where are the results? So it's a vicious cycle, which one thing going down, the entire ecosystem topples. And because of that, a lot of startups are shutting down, and many of them for good.
So what do they do? I mean, what's the words of wisdom? So there's a company that's in Mumbai that wants to raise money. What do they do today? I mean, how do they can't set up person to person meetings? I mean, what are they doing to be able to accommodate? How do they do that?
So essentially, the best option for them is going to be, kind of understand how they can pivot the business model, right? If their business model is extremely dependent on a specific situation, if they're looking only for Indian customers or to a specific model, right? So there are a couple of education startups which are reliant primarily on schools and colleges, right? So obviously, schools and colleges have been heavily impacted. So what they can do is kind of pivot into making it like a home education system, or kind of create their own educational content, or pivot into that front. Another option would be so travel industry, right? In fact, one of my friends, he ran a travel CRM kind of company. He really pivoted into creating a whole travel lifestyle kind of a brand around itself, and he created another independent CRM which can be used by literally any industry. So the most important thing is to kind of pivot into something which can accommodate for COVID, because COVID is going to be there at least another 6 to 9 months till the end of 2021, right? You need to be flexible with the business model. At the same time, also look at global expansion. For Indian people, the closest thing would be, look at something like a Singapore or a Dubai, because they are relatively they are not as badly hit as India because of that. And that's why the lockdowns which are there in India, they're not the same over there. So it's far more easier to get those paying customers which are required.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, the other thing is, we always say intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities aren't. So go to places like Africa, use the network to be able to, the relationships that you have to be able to get out to the market, because that's really critical to get out there. We use at GSD, Silicon Valley as a port to the rest of the world. So if I want to raise money from India or China or Israel, wherever I want to raise money, there's some kind of a representative that's there that could be interesting. And it is about tying everything together on a global basis right now. It's a lot different than it was a year and a half ago before the pandemic. It was like, let's have meetings, let's get together, I'll fly to Mumbai, let's have lunch, etc. But those days, are behind us for a while. And at the same time, look at what's happened with Zoom. Here we are, StreamYard, founded in 2018. These technologies really dominate getting the word out, getting the visibility and credibility. Startups that are out there, I got to tell you, no matter where you are around the world, you've got to write, you've got to have articles, you got to get videos done to be able to talk about your company. You got to get engaged on a global basis. You got to be known as a thought leader, or just not going to happen. It's really hard to get funded if you don't go through those steps. And it isn't easy, but listen, if a country boy from Pennsylvania can get the word out, a little bit, anybody can do it. So it's an incredible opportunity. Look at it from the positive, stay positive. Look at where the opportunities are. I met a guy, by the way, there was a company called Sun Microsystems many years ago, and I met the founder, one of the founders of Sun. I had lunch with him, Scott McNeely. And I'll never forget this, Harsh. He said to me, always go to the areas that you fear the most, because you're going to learn the most. Those are the places where you can reap the reward. Go to places where other people are afraid to go or don't understand how to get there. Do that. If you do that, that's how you win. And I remember I had met him years before, and I had lunch with him. And one of the things that he said is, that was really the guidance for his life. Is that principle is go to the areas that where you can learn and that you're afraid of. So it's great. So what do you forecast over the next? If you look at like AI, quantum computing, I mean, what's hot? If you take the top five in India right now in developing countries, what's hot? What kind of companies are you seeing?
Got it. So, quantum computing is still very in the initial stages in India. It kind of doesn't have that kind of penetration, right? However, AI is it's ridiculous how AI is increasingly being used in India. And the best part is, unlike in Silicon Valley, where the talent is extremely expensive, in India it's relatively affordable, right? So you don't require $10 million to even just to build a product. You can get that done for 2 or 3 million. That's the best part, and that's why India is heavily attracting investments. In fact, I'm just in touch with a very innovative company. It creates a fintech SaaS for chit funds, right? Imagine a solution like that, which is something
What is it?
we won't even.
It creates for what funds?
So it's a chit fund concept. Are you familiar with
Got it.
that?
Hmm.
So they are creating an AI SaaS model for a chit fund company, and I just came across that last week. And right, so the other kind of innovative models which you are seeing, how people are coming up with something truly innovative. One of my friends is working on a fintech lending model, primarily a micro lending model. Something like $1,000, $2,000 for people in the smaller, lower economic strata, and the amount of interest that you get is also truly high over there. So they are doing very well. They are doing phenomenally well in terms of the money that they're raising. One of the most notable companies which I came across was in the health tech space essentially. So they were trying to create a very unique health tech system. Essentially, what that would do is take away the entire medical transcription problems, right? Across the world right now, what's happening is healthcare data is completely disorganized, right? Each and every hospital wants to keep their own separate data instead of creating a central data repository. Because of that, the biggest that I attribute the biggest problem right now to that due to COVID, because what has happened is the data is completely scattered. People are not aggregating and putting them under one roof. If we would have had that kind of data, all that we needed to do is put it into an AI system, and we could have gotten a good prediction of what future ailments that the person have. We could have laser targeted the people who have who were most susceptible to COVID, and kind of then the proper targeting for them, and put them under better security, a better scrutiny to ensure that they don't fall victim to COVID. But because of this localization and the poor lack of medical transcription which is there, that is the biggest source of problem right now. So this company is trying to do that, make medical transcription easier, at the same time create an AI assistant to kind of ensure that whenever that you're communicating, it's easily recorded, and it also gives you a more feedback. So it becomes like a doctor's personal secretary without actually someone being there in person, and at the same time transcribing that. Imagine the benefits of something like that.
Oh, I mean, but these not smart but intelligent assistants, we're going to see more and more of those across all facets of our lives because we are in a state of infobesity, right? We have 40 zettabytes of data on the planet today, 20
Yeah.
if you stack CDs, as you've heard me say many times, on one on top of another, it would go back and forth to the moon 29 times, and it's grown at 68% per year. So we're inundated. But if we want to live to 150, which many people are saying our new target, we've got to have technologies like that. So, what else do you see? What other kind of promising companies are interesting, and what kind of what vertical markets?
So essentially, there's this one startup which I came across last week, in fact, not too long ago. So interesting thing, what they are doing is, despite India's internet penetration and kind of having like 600 million people access to digital technologies and mobile handsets, the biggest challenge is most people still don't use anything beyond Facebook and WhatsApp, because most of the rest of the technology is far too complicated for them to understand, right? So this company is trying to make it more user friendly, make it more simple, and it's going to be applicable across all the other devices. So imagine the utility of something like that, right? So if the Facebook is currently penetrated only to like 20-30 cr urban population, imagine if they could penetrate the next 300 million of Indian people, right? That is the opportunity which they are working on. So that is another interesting space which I'm seeing. Additionally, unfortunately, because of India's crypto regulations, the blockchain developers are a little spooked, but I definitely see a lot of potential in terms of blockchain as well, because we need something with that, in especially in the agri-tech space, where a lot of what happens is the supply chain in the agri-tech space is completely messed up. A lot of pilferage happens, a lot of loss of tagging happens. Sometimes even the inventory is stolen completely off the records, and that problem is there not just in the agriculture space, but even the rest of the supply chain space, right? If we have something like blockchain in space using the Ethereum, ERC20 with a blockchain smart contract inbuilt into that, all that problem can be completely solved. So those are some of the things which I see a lot of a lot of progress happening right now.
Interesting, interesting. And what do you see? What other, do you see much, if you look at developing countries, what about Africa? What do you see happening in Africa, Harsh?
So unfortunately, I don't have too much exposure to Africa. I'm familiar with Gerald, whom you've partnered with for
Hey,
startup.
Harsh, hold on. My alarm goes off here and I just want to turn it off because it's stuck.
Okay,
So
okay, no worries.
I'm going to be moving along. Hold on. Do, 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 do.
No worries.
Okay. I got it. It's the first time I had to get up and walk on a on one of the podcasts. Okay,
No
sorry.
worries. Yeah, so as I was saying, in Africa, I still don't have that much exposure to the African market. I do have a couple of exposure in the Israeli market. People startups are reaching out to me from Israel. But in startups, I'm familiar with Spotter. The one you've partnered with. Gerald, in fact, had reached out to me when you were partnering with him, and I did kind of help him with his marketing materials and when he was first launching his IEO at that point of time. So Africa, the thing is, right now it is still at a very nascent stage compared to the startup ecosystems, right? So India went through that stage around 10 years back. India's startup ecosystem developed around 2008, 2009, or just after the financial crisis of 2008, right? That is when Indian ecosystem really started to bloom and try to grow. The same time is right now in the African continent, right? So if anyone gets into the African continent at this point of time, they are still at a very nascent stage, and the opportunity to grow over there is absolutely phenomenal. So something like a Paytm in India, which started about 7 or 8 years back, right now there's still an opportunity for creating something like a Paytm, which is a simple fintech payment solution, which is want to make it extremely easy. They still have an opportunity to do over there. The only developed country no, I would not say developed, but slightly more advanced country is Nigeria, which is doing a lot of progress, a lot of development. But rest of the countries are still far, far back. So tremendous opportunity which I see.
Well, I mean, there's 206 million people. Most people don't realize. I mean, it's Africa, like India's got over 1 billion people across the continent, and just Nigeria itself has 206 million people. And you talk about entrepreneurship. The one thing we were recently down in Nigeria, there's incredible talent there. And the I didn't associate Nigeria with artificial intelligence, but on Saturdays, they actually have an event called AI Saturdays to be able to nurture it. And they're really amazing in terms of fintech. And it's not just Nigeria, but I mean, look at Kenya. Some of the companies they're skipping across some of the current infrastructure that the rest of the world has, like in fintech, and moving into other directions. So, they're going ahead of us in a whole lot of ways, which is an incredible, fascinating. So I see it. What about in terms of how easy is it to do business in India, Harsh? Is it collegial? Is it tough? Do you need connections? How does it work?
So to be quite honest, if someone from US or Europe or from other countries wants to come into India, it's definitely advisable to have an Indian office and someone you can trust, because the ecosystem, the culture is completely different, right? So unless you have trustworthy people over here who can handle the operations, it will get extremely difficult, and people's expectations, it's completely different. I like to say
What
that
do
the
you what do
Western
you mean, Harsh? What do you mean by expectations? What does that mean?
So essentially, what happens is I like to kind of say that sometimes the Western civilizations tend to be far too logical and far too linear in terms of their approach, right? It's very linear, very logical, very straightforward. India is it's not that simple. India is quite complicated. There are multiple factors in place. Apart from logic, there are lots of other factors in terms of emotions are there, and eccentricities are there, biases are there, and each and every state is different. So coming back to the point which you had made in the beginning of the session,
Mhm.
Mumbai is an extremely fast-paced city, right? Over here, people are working till 10 p.m., 11 p.m. at night, and they reach home at 12 p.m. or sometimes even past midnight. You compare that with some of the other cities like Kolkata, where people wrap up their works by 5 p.m., 6 p.m. latest, and they're comfortably sitting at home. Occasionally, of course, there are exceptions with some people kind of working late nights, but by more or less, it is a much more they prefer work-life balance and those kind of cultures. So the local eccentricities and all that is there. So that is why if an international company wants to set up in India, it's extremely important to have a local office who understands the local culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. It's like Silicon Valley. People think Silicon Valley, you have sandals and you wear shorts and you wear t-shirts and everything's cool and you hang around and you're in these beanbag chairs, etc. But it's nothing like that, Harsh. I got to tell you, you really, really work a lot.
Yeah.
It's not quite. There's one thing about having the beer bashes on the Friday afternoon, but I mean, you really work hard and you get, that's, I guess that's part of it, right? You have fun, you work together, you create something incredible like a Facebook or Twitter or Google or Tesla. You create an incredible company. And the other thing is, most people don't realize it's a combination of multicultural diversity. It's people from all over the world coming together and sharing their ideas, their knowledge, and their connections to be able to really make it work. The other thing is, we look at it as three components. One is you need to have these decentralized teams. Having programming capabilities in places like India is incredible because the talent is high level and the costs are a little bit less. And you really start to factor it in. It's amazing, and they work like crazy. I've had Indian teams, Russian teams working for me. I mean, they just work really hard and get this stuff done. Then the other side of it is sometimes we forget, Harsh, you need intergenerational teams. You need some of the gray hair because especially now you need the contacts. And if you don't have the credibility, you're a startup that just came out of IT and you don't have the credibility on the world market, it's hard to get it now because you can't get out and meet with the people and talk to them. You got to do it. You got to have those contacts. So startups out there, make sure that you have advisors, make sure you have members of your team that are intergenerational. It'll help a great deal of impact. So you look at India over the next 6 to 9 months going through this COVID situation. If you would have one piece of advice for a startup right now, Harsh, that's out there that's struggling in India or Brazil, what would you say to them?
So essentially, the biggest challenge which I have noticed for most of these early stage startups is kind of access to the point which you mentioned, right? Networks, connections, and even potential customers, right? So if you look at it, it requires a lot of upfront money even to test out your concept, right? You run these Facebook ads, they cost like $5, $10 per conversion. It gets pretty expensive pretty quick, and even to get a few hundred customers, it ends up burning a few $1,000s. And it may not be that much of a big deal in the US, but in India that's quite prominent. So and even access to that the high quality network, it becomes extremely challenging. So that's why the most important thing is to kind of work like a startup community, right? If you look at it, the most incubators and the accelerators in the world right now, they only choose some of the best startups out there, right? But what about the rest of them? Some of the You have the Ycoms, you have the Techstars, you have the 500, you have all the best accelerators in the world. The focus is to identify the top 1% or even the top 0.5% of the startups. But what about the remaining 99%? How do we get access to solutions, for them? So that is exactly why I kind of, originally created my group Startup Hackers. And surprisingly, in the last a little over 2 months, I have over 800 members in that group, and we are growing very quickly. So that is the idea, to kind of create like a community atmosphere, a shared knowledge kind of an atmosphere where you kind of learn from each other's experiences.
So
The startup
tell us about Startup Hackers, Harsh? I mean, so the audience may not know, and also how do they join?
So it is right now. It is essentially just a Facebook group, right? All they have to do is search Startup Hackers in Facebook, and you can find the group and join that. You'll notice the kind of discussions that we are having over there. It is absolutely phenomenal. Most of the other Facebook groups, you have all these crazy links. People are posting random
Mhm.
promotions. But I am actively curating that to ensure that we only have qualitative discussions over there. And we have people from Africa, we have people from Singapore, we have people from the Middle East, and the idea is to create a startup community of a few thousand 100,000 members in the coming 2 3 years, where essentially you don't even have to go outside to get your initial customers. You have that
Mhm.
customers in house. All you have to do is network within the community, get people interested with your product. They can test out, they can give you feedback. Imagine the amount of time saved, imagine the amount of money saved down the line. That is the
Yeah,
idea,
no,
so that
I mean that's a great idea. We did it in Russia. I started an entrepreneurs club, Harsh, and I remember the first one I started at Skolkovo School of Management with my partner Lawrence Wright. We had only a few people come in. At the biggest one I had over 2,000. I had 2,200 people. I had an auditorium, and I had the outside part of the outside of the auditorium filled with TV monitor. I felt like a tele-evangelist or something. It was unbelievable. and
Nice.
it happened in less than a year. So, that's a great idea. You need to bring, especially now with the pandemic, bringing people together so they can share ideas and contacts. It's just so important. What about the money? I mean, in terms of the venture capitalists in India, how are they finding those startups now during this pandemic?
So definitely, the investors, the VCs have become quite choosy as of right now, right? Because considering how many startups are closing as of right now, what a peculiar thing which has happened is the few startups which are doing well, they are kind of getting overfunded, and rest of the startups which are sort of on an average side, they're not getting
Mhm.
funded at all. And even the fairly good startups are getting closed because of the lack of funding. That's a very weird, peculiar problem which has been created, and that is why kind of the people like me and our ventures and startup hackers, and there are a few other angel networks, we are the ones who are kind of ensuring that for the early stage the funding doesn't get dried up. So there are a couple of other networks like our ventures who are doing that. We are kind of ensuring, and we are doing a lot of follow up with the VCs to ensure and show the promise and kind of tell them that if you don't invest at the early stage, how will you find companies at the later stage to invest in? You need to start taking companies at the early stage as well. You
Yeah,
cannot
that's the
ignore them.
keep it simple, stupid rule, right?
Exactly.
This isn't rocket science. If you want to keep the system going, if you got a seed, you got to put some water on there, make sure it has some sunlight to grow. Now, I agree with you 100%. But these are lessons around the world that we need to understand. We need to curate the ecosystem and help the ecosystem grow so we can find those companies like a Flutter Wave in Africa, like a
Exactly.
Facebook or a Google. Absolutely. So, in closing, we're coming to the top of the hour, Harsh. I really appreciate you being here today. What are some closing thoughts for the audience in terms of, what can they do right now? Just in closing, from your standpoint, not just in India but all over the world as a startup.
So I understand, the current COVID times have been troubling across the world. So right now, the most important thing is to understand the true value of the important things in life. Stay close to your family, stay close to your friends. At the same time, even when you're working with your startup, do understand the nitty-gritties which are involved, and try to build a community around that as well. It requires a village to make a startup. It requires a village to make a unicorn. You cannot do that alone. So try and build that community, and always think through that way. It's not a great product doesn't become a unicorn. It requires a community. It requires a network. You need to work with as many people as you can, and try and be as polite as possible to people, because what's happening is it is so the tragedy is so much, quite honestly, that we sometimes tend to forget the importance of niceties in life. So we need to kind of ensure that that is in place.
Yeah, that's great. And how do they get a hold of you, Harsh?
So, I'm always available. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Harsh Shethia, venture partner with our ventures. I'm also very active on Facebook as well, and happy to help any early stage startups looking to raise funds or looking to expand their business, grow into international geographies like in Singapore and US, and always happy to help out. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Harsh, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. To the entire GSD team, thank you so much for making GSD Presents possible. It's appreciated. My name's Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay tuned for the next edition on Thursday. Stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy. Talk to you soon.